To be simple, 'tis a gift. To be free, 'tis a gift. To come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right.
The journey of my life started on a tropical island in the South Pacific and has brought me so far to the beautiful mountainous area here in northern Utah. Like you, all of you, my life has been filled with happiness, grief, joy, sadness, adventure, discovery, friendship, and learning. Come along with me while I share with you some of the things I've done and I've learned in my past 70 years on this planet. When I was an infant, I of course, had no idea of the journey my life would take, but perhaps an early clue was being born on the tropical island of Samoa. I'm sure you've all heard about baby animals imprinting on the faces they see when they are babies. I believe that somewhat happened to me. On Samoa, the hospital aides were Samoan ladies, and we had two Samoan house girls who wanted to hold and feed the cute little red-headed baby whenever they could. I wonder if I saw more Samoan faces in those early months than I saw my mom and my pop's faces. Even today, I feel drawn to Polynesian faces and quite often pick out a Samoan in a group of Polynesians. I was the third child in my family with two older brothers and a sister who came along 9 years after me. My family was initially a Navy family, moving from Samoa to Maryland and then eventually back to San Francisco Bay Area, where we lived and what later was to become the Silicon Valley. I did not think of myself as an adventurous person, and I did not feel that I had any special talents. I had no clue what I wanted to be when I grew up and spent my early days enjoying my family, friends, pets, and all the things we did as a family, which included camping, Sunday drives, visiting grandparents and cousins. Although we were members of the Palo Alto Unitarian Church, I have very little memories of any involvement in that church. I guess I just had fun. When I was 12, my family uprooted and moved across country to Northern Virginia. My pop was transferred to the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. To get to the D.C. area, we took a 3-week trip across the northern part of the country, which included visit to the Seattle World's Fair, camping in Glacier National Park, in Yellowstone Park, and seeing other sites like Mount Rushmore along the way. This ended up being a wonderful family trip. Arriving in the D.C. area was quite a change for the pre-teenage me. My oldest brother only made the trip to Virginia with us, and then he flew back to California where he joined the Navy as an aviator. My other brother was already driving, dating, and seemed to have a lot of friends. He played banjo and guitar, and in the folk music and hootenanny days, that was popular. We moved into a brand new development close to Mount Vernon, which ended up being populated by families of military brass, higher-ups in the federal government, scientists, and other of similar ilk. Since most of the families moved in during the same summer, my brother and I had instant friends, and we held impromptu songfests on our front corner house lawn. The parents of the neighborhood teens loved it because they knew where their teenagers were. I started high school at a brand new high school, which was academically rated one of the top 10 in the nation at that time. I actually fell out of my league with the academic competition. I did end up with some amazing teachers who challenged my thinking and encouraged me to expand my philosophical views. I was a Girl Scout through my senior year, and that opened up opportunities that I have never expected. I was able to volunteer at the Smithsonian as an information guide, at the Peace Corps office in the mail facility, at embassies and consulates as an American teen representative when they had parties, and eventually at a family-run music store that hired me for my first job. My mother and father were always taking my brother, sister, and me into D.C. for important occasions. I saw the funeral procession from the White House to the Capitol building for John F. Kennedy. I also saw astronaut parades that were down Pennsylvania Avenue. I saw Martin Luther King give his I Have a Dream speech. My mom even took me to do research at the Library of Congress for a report I had to do just because she thought I should. My parents volunteered at the Air and Space Museum and a similar facility in Maryland called Silver Hill, where they helped work on restoration of a plane for the Air and Space Museum. The family involvement at the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church started when we moved to Virginia. It was 1962, and right about the time that the Unitarian Church merged with the Universalist Church. Within a year, my pop was elected to the board of directors and then became involved in a ministerial search when the seated minister retired. The search took longer than expected, so Pop became the lay minister for about a year. Eventually, a minister was hired, and he made quite an impact on the church. He wanted to take the youth group, of which I was a part, to Selma, Alabama, but that plan was changed at the last minute. I think he saw the potential for danger in which he and the board did not want the youth to be involved. He was with Reverend James Reed minutes before Reed was killed. I stayed active with the youth group and somehow found the courage to actually speak at church and to also be part of a committee at school that arranged speakers to come to the school for talks. Through my various volunteer activities, I knew many prominent DC people who were willing to come speak. Even our UU minister came to speak. I ended up chairing a couple of clubs at school, which helped my resume for college. Throughout most of my high school years, my family was host to many summer and full-year exchange students. That was exciting because I was sharing my room with people from other countries. My parents also opened up our home through the UU Church to people coming to DC for various marches and activities. I would often come home from school to find I was sharing a room with a stranger. College was looming, and I applied to several. Someone from my pop's office suggested Whittier College in Southern California. He had strings at the college, and I was accepted. I was still 17 when I flew to from Virginia to California. I now was somewhat on my own, although I lived in a dorm. My first roommate was from Sri Lanka, then Ceylon. My college was Richard Nixon's alma mater, and the anti-war effort was strong among college students. We tried to send a message to Nixon, with Whittier being involved in several sit-ins and walkouts. I met the man who became my first husband within my first year of college. He was a year ahead of me. He was a folk singer and performed at many Southern California venues. He also was very into classical and modern literature and classical music. We would get together with his best friend, also a literature and music geek, and we would read aloud books to each other. We also had season tickets to the opera, LA Symphony, and a series of theatrical performances. He was also very into movies, and we owned a 16mm projector, and we would borrow movies from the library to show at home. All that was an amazing addition to my education. He ended up getting accepted to Arizona State University for his master's degree, and so we moved to Tempe, Arizona. After 2 years there, he ended up getting a job offer in Hollywood at a studio attached to Columbia Pictures to start as a projectionist. I was hired as the receptionist. I was emotionally unsettled and couldn't quite figure it out. I enjoyed all the things we did and enjoyed some of the friends we had, but I wanted to travel home to see my family in Virginia. My husband was afraid of flying and didn't want me to fly. I had come to the conclusion that I didn't like his controlling ways. He didn't want me to get my California driver's license until I demanded it. He discovered that it gave him more freedom. Finally, I woke up and realized that I didn't like the people I was meeting in Hollywood. I didn't like his controlling ways and discovered that he was actually cheating on me. I decided we needed to separate and I would move back to Virginia. Once I was out of that sphere of influence, I started finding myself again. I explored the bookstores at Georgetown and started learning more about meditation and other elements of what eventually became growth practices, I guess. During this time, I went back to school at a local community college. Through an old friend from high school, I was introduced to my second husband to be, Chris, when we went sailing out of Annapolis on his 32-foot sailboat. I thought he was 20 years older than me and discovered that he was actually 3 years younger. Those sailors' beards are deceptive. He was the man who offered me adventure and a means to discover myself. A few months after we met, Chris invited me to join him on his sailboat and sail to the Bahamas to help run the dive shop in which he was a partner. We had a crew of 4. We sailed down the Chesapeake Bay and out onto the Atlantic Ocean. About 500 miles off the coast of Georgia, we encountered a hurricane, which forced us to turn around and sail with the storm. This was my first experience with anything so dangerous. I don't recall if I was scared or terrified, but I knew that if we were going to survive the hurricane, I had to learn quickly what I had to do. I took the helm for my shifts, I learned to make coffee on our gimbaled stove, and I learned to get my sleep on the shifts when I had the chance. I actually think that somehow I was in survival mode and was determined to make it safely out of the storm. We were finally calmed off Cape Hatteras after 14 days in that storm. I think my tenacity endeared me to my future husband because he started bragging about me to others. This was new for me. Other than my parents, I rarely had anyone sing my praises. We ended up back in Northern Virginia where I was put through scuba classes and sailing classes. Once certified, we left again for the island of the Bahamas, but this time we took the intercoastal waterway down to Bimini. That was an amazing adventure and made me into a sailor. He encouraged my singing and guitar playing and tried to showcase me whenever he could. In Bimini, Chris got a call from a partner and that he had to get to the island immediately. He flew out to the island and I had to take the sailboat back to Fort Lauderdale. I had 2 16-year-olds on board with me, and after some specific directions, we started out. We actually made it across, pulled into the intercoastal waterway and into a slip in the marina. I felt like I accomplished something huge. A couple of months later, we decided to sell the boat. I was left with that task. This was another experience of having the trust of someone with something so important. We ran the dive shop together for 2 years, and one day the partners decided that I should leave the island so Chris could be a single dive master and be there for the single girls who came on diving trips. Chris refused. He said, "If Cynthia leaves, I leave." Chris always encouraged me, promoted me to others, and told people how amazing he thought I was. Since I had experienced someone in my first husband who was driven by his ego, I was definitely embarrassed by all the kudos I got from Chris. After we left the island, we ended up in San Diego and Chris joined the Coast Guard. He had previously been in the Army 82nd Airborne. He wasn't afraid of things like parachutes. Before he left for boot camp, we got married in the University Unitarian Church in San Diego. We got stationed in eastern Washington on the Columbia River. I went back to school and got a job. We had our oldest son, Tyler, while we were there at that station. When Chris's time came up to re-enlist, he chose to get out and go back to school. We moved up by Spokane and we both went back to school. I graduated with a degree in teaching. Meanwhile, we had a second baby boy, Malcolm, but he died of SIDS at 2 months old. We became grief counselors through the SIDS Foundation of Eastern Washington, and I ended up as president of that organization. 1.5 years later, our daughter, Lori, was born. I applied for teaching jobs wherever I could and interviewed for several positions in California when district representatives came to Washington. I was hired by Lake Elsinore School District in Southern California. And if you've seen pictures of amazing poppies right now, that's where it is. We moved there in 1985 and I started my teaching career. I found I loved teaching. Chris got a job as an environmental engineer. Sadly, he ended up getting rear-ended 3 times in the next 4 years and died of a massive heart attack 4 years after we moved down there. I was devastated, but I also had 2 young kids I had to raise by myself. I was amazed at the support I had from friends and colleagues. I didn't have any family close by, so I knew I had to hang in there and keep the life as normal as possible for my kids. They both grew up to be amazing adults with a sense of adventure and purpose. For that, I'm glad. Other bumps in my road have included my dance with breast cancer 16 years ago and a pacemaker put in 2 years ago. So what have I learned from this life journey? I've learned that I need to rely on myself. I also need to realize that I can't do everything, and I need to be able to say no, which is still hard for me to do. I need to take time for myself and find balance in the things that I do. I enjoy working and being back in the classroom, and actually was bored of being retired. I love being with my grandkids, and I don't get enough of them. They tire me out, but they still leave me with a renewed energy. It is okay for me to travel by myself, and it is okay to have a good time. Bubble baths and reading are a way to relax, and it's okay to take naps. Having my cats and my bird are wonderful and keep my home happy. And yes, I eventually want to get a dog. I don't have to apologize for my thoughts and things I say because I have learned to be careful with other people's feelings. It is okay to make choices that only affect me. I have learned to love myself and to believe in myself, and I've learned that I'm okay the way I am. So what's beyond? Continuing to learn through classes, podcasts, webinars, and from others. Continuing to work on genealogy. Continuing to teach and hopefully make a difference in kids' lives. Continuing to come to UUCO and hopefully to make a difference here. More road trips, more fun with grandkids, and connecting with new and old friends, and living life to the fullest. I was told recently that I'm a rock star. This was by one of my administrators. I'll take that compliment and run with it.